We are back, and welcome everyone to another episode of Fiscal Fridays. If you enjoyed this show, please like this video and subscribe to the channel to keep Idaho Freedom content in your newsfeed. The federal government practically owns the state of Idaho, and I'm not just talking about landmass either. The feds are buying the Idaho government. Starting next week, the federal government will support 40% of Idaho's spending. The value is only grown from last year and flies in the face of Governor Brad Little's claims that the budget is balanced. It is important to remember that those who have money have the power, and Uncle Sam has enough leverage to twist the proverbial arm of Idaho's leaders. You'll find that this federal funding is deeply entrenched in the state budget. Being that the feds have the right to control how this money is spent, this directs Idaho policy. The only way to address this issue is to reduce our dependence on DC dollars. So how much is the federal government really paying to the gem state? The Legislative Services Office recently released a report noting that this value is more than $5.6 billion. Most of this funding is going to three key budget divisions: education, health and welfare, and economic development. The biggest contributors to these are the public schools, Medicaid, and the Idaho Transportation Department. Astonishingly, these departments will take in 74% of all federal spending this coming fiscal year. Some would argue that this funding is made up of temporary dollars used for one-time projects, but this is not entirely true. Roughly $800 million of all federal funding in the next fiscal year will be one-time expenditures. The remaining $4.8 billion is ongoing and integrates with the base budget, meaning that it will carry over into future fiscal years. This ongoing funding will go down some after COVID money expires in 2026, but not enough to discount its importance. We should be asking one very important question. What does the federal government stand to gain from all this spending? It is important to remember that federal funding comes with strings attached. As outlined in the Supreme Court case North Dakota versus Dole, the federal government is allowed to place conditions on the receipt of funds. When states accept federal funding with known conditions placed on them, those funds can be taken away for violation of those conditions. In this way, the federal government has a large say in how Idaho students learn, how we administer medical welfare, and how we develop our infrastructure. Last summer, the Biden administration attempted to use funding for free and reduced-price lunch programs to prompt schools to implement non-binary bathroom and sports policies. On Medicaid, Idaho accepted funds for enhanced federal match for their Medicaid program. This meant that the state could not remove virtually anyone who was ineligible for medical welfare from the last 3 years. This drained resources for those who truly needed them. So what should Idaho do with all of this free federal money? After all, Idahoans pay taxes to the federal government too, so why shouldn't we get any of that money back? The first problem is that the federal government is spending money that it doesn't actually have. Accepting and spending these dollars permits the federal government to perpetually increase an invisible tax on every Idahoan, a tax better known as inflation. In the process of printing more money, the dollars that you have in your pocket are worth less, and the federal government transfers the resources to themselves, supposedly spending it on you. In short, the dollar in your pocket doesn't go as far, while the government simply makes more of them to get the job done. And really, who is better at spending your money, you or the federal government? Another point is that Governor Brad Little cannot say that we have a balanced budget when 2 in 5 of all the dollars we spend comes from those who borrowed and printed their way toward giving them to us. Our spending of federal dollars is just as much borrowed from Idahoans and the spending at the federal level. This is not fiscal conservatism or balanced budgeting. Our founders would be appalled by how we have allowed Washington, D.C. to purchase their right to tyrannize us. The only way to fight this is to spend less and reduce our dependence on the federal piggy bank. In this way, Idaho can assert its independence from federal control and work to slow the decline of America's wealth. To wrap up, the federal government is spending billions of dollars to purchase the control of the gem state. In the process, Americans are having their wealth and their values toppled by Congress and D.C. bureaucrats. To end this federal overreach, Idahoans must stand up and cut the federal funding from the budget. Idaho's prosperity depends on it. For more episodes of Fiscal Fridays or other great content from the Idaho Freedom Foundation, please visit idahofreedom.org. Thank you for watching.